Welcome to Crosspolitic. Chocolate Knox, Pastor Toby. Gabe is not here. I have no idea why. I think he's doing some sort of business making.
He got raptured. Yeah, it's true.
It's true?
Yeah, he went to Israel. Now he got raptured.
Oh. Well, I'm going to tell you who is here. David Bahnsen is here. I like him because he has my name. Oh, I have his name. He's an elder. So. Yeah. And he's going to be here to tell you why you need to be at this year's Fight, Laugh, Feast conference on School Wars. If you have not bought your tickets yet, now is the time to buy your tickets because you're going to want to hear one of his wonderful talks. I think his wonderful talk. He's not having two. Why don't we ever give him two?
I don't know.
We should. Maybe he doesn't have time for two.
He's busy making some money.
Making America competitive again. Why education is ground zero for markets. I'm very happy to have this conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to talk to David Bahnsen about Tooth and Nail Records.
He was really excited about it, too. You could tell by the look on his face when I mentioned it. David Bahnsen is founder and chief investment officer of the Bahnsen Group, national wealth management firm overseeing $6.2 billion across multiple U.S. offices, named among America's top financial advisors by Barron's, Forbes, the Financial Times, and Crosspolitic. He's a frequent guest on major news networks and a contributor to National Review and World. Bahnsen's also an author, speaker, and advocate for the integration of faith and economics. He's also been a recurring guest here on Crosspolitic and a speaker at this year's Fight, Laugh, Feast conference. School Wars. You just said that. I feel like I'm repeating you, but it's all right. People weren't listening. He's going to be speaking at the School Wars Fight, Laugh, Feast conference in Nashville, Tennessee, just in like 6 weeks or something like that. I don't know what the countdown is. The title of his talk is going to be Making America Competitive Again, Why Education is Ground Zero for Markets. David, as always, it's good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. We are 8.1 billion. It happens every time I come on. We've gone up by $1 billion every time I come speak with you. We just have to constantly update that number.
Clearly, the moral of this story is that we need to have you on more often.
Or that every time I go on, it adds $1 billion.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
It's that cross-politic bump.
Well,
that's if Gabe was here. I'm just being Gabe.
We'll have you on again next week.
Yeah. Hold on. I wanted to, because we already teased and I have to start here. Okay, the reason I wanted to start here, and hopefully we get to the rest of this with your talk and
hopefully
convincing everybody else to come out to the Fight, Laugh, Feast conference. But I was just thinking, Darren Doan, you guys know each other from Tooth and Nail Records, and that transition from you at Tooth and Nail Records to now managing, $8.1 billion. How did that happen? What were you doing at Tooth and Nail? What was your job there? And then how did you go from that to let's just call it out now, $9.1 billion.
Yeah. How do I tell this story in a few minutes? A gentleman by the name of Brandon Ebel, who lives in Seattle, Washington, started Tooth and Nail Records in late 1993. I was working with a number of bands in Southern California. This is before either Brandon or myself had met Darren, a couple years before at least. And there was no connection between what I was doing in Southern California, what Brandon was getting ready to do. He had moved down to Southern California. And a couple of the first bands that Brandon signed to Tooth and Nail were bands that I had been managing. So Tooth and Nail was Brandon's company, and my booking agency and management firm was my company, but we worked very closely together. And I think at one point there were a dozen groups I was working with that were on Tooth and Nail. And so, Brandon and I were kind of joined to the hip there for a lot of years and had a lot of fun. And some people continued to enjoy working with musicians. And I enjoyed it the way I enjoy having a hot pin stuck in my head.
So you really liked it.
But like most people that worked in the 1990s Christian music scene, I went on to start an $8 billion wealth management firm.
What was that jump like? Like, what is it that you're doing? Is it just managing, or how do you go from that? Did you go to college? What was the process?
No, that's why I was doing the musical stuff, because I didn't go to college because my dad died. And so you guys know that story, but all those things are kind of correlated as a sort of timing issue. Is dad died, no money, no direction, no mentorship, no, idea what I wanted to do with my life. But I had friends in bands and they were a disaster. And so they needed my help. I'm just kidding. Sort of.
Maybe
but
not.
I was pretty good at it. I worked really hard, and I wasn't as much of a music guy, but I really cared about organization and deal making, and some really big things happened in that period, and the whole Christian music world was kind of taking off at the time. I learned a lot. The stock market also in the second half of the 1990s was taking off, and I was starting to make a few bucks, and I was investing and had built a good business. I had an office in Nashville where we're doing Fight, Laugh, Feast. And I had an office here in Newport Beach, California, where I'm sitting right now. And so it was sort of my college. I learned how to run a business. I learned how to overcome the adversity of, governmental regulation and personnel conflict and just the regular things you deal with. But I learned it in my young 20s. And from that, had the self-confidence that I could go out and do a real business. And at 27, I found a buyer for our little agency. That individual who took that on, I'm still friends with to this day. He runs a coffee import business now, and I'm actually an investor in his company. And kind of moved on. And so some of the friendships have stayed intact, and obviously Darren is one of those. Although I went, what was it? Let's call it from 2000 till when I was in Moscow taping this show with you guys. Yeah. That was the first time I had seen Darren. And so what would that have been? That was around COVID?
Yeah, right after.
Yeah, you know what? It was the NSA graduation in 2020. So I bet I went 20 years without seeing Darren.
Wow.
And so then saw him in Moscow. And Darren and I are like brothers.
Do you think that those type of opportunities still exist right now in America for someone to make that transition?
Of course they do. Of course. They all kinds of opportunities exist for people in America. Here I spoke about this at the event in Tucson, the Reformicon event this year. I think the reason why some Christians don't think they exist is I do believe that there are too many Christians caught up in self-pity and victimhood. I think it's reasonably systemic for a lot of believers to think I can't go get ahead, or the aspirational society is not for me. There's too much discrimination against Christians or whatever. I don't believe that, but I also don't believe it for any economic actor in society. My very first book I ever wrote, Crisis of Responsibility, is somewhat about this. I believe that the general mentality necessary to go succeed in any endeavor is available for all of us, but we do have to take accountability and agency to make that happen.
David, your talk is called Making America Competitive Again.
Yeah.
Is this tied to, what makes you think, why have we lost our competitive advantage?
Well, what's interesting is I don't think we've lost our competitive advantage. I think that on a relative basis, I think that we as American economic actors are still the envy of the world in terms of entrepreneurial capability and the general DNA of the country. So I don't join in the doomsdayers who think all is lost for America's economic output. We're still a pretty productive country, but I think that competitive edge on an absolute basis, meaning relative to what we're capable of, we've lost a significant amount of that margin, of that gap, of that edge. And I think education is ground zero for a lot of that. And the double entendre in it, Toby, is that I think education itself needs to be competitive. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of focus, which is the right way to start, around the worldview deficiencies of state monopolistic education, of the idolatrous tendencies, of the ideological, philosophical shortcomings of state-biased education. But one of the things that gets lost in that philosophical and theological and often ethical argument, one of the things that gets lost is that the state education system has removed itself from competitive forces.
Right.
And therefore is not accountable for the things that markets generally hold people accountable for. So if you have a coffee shop in a neighborhood and you have bad coffee and bad service, and there's another coffee shop in the neighborhood, then the better coffee shop is going to eat your lunch, and the worst coffee shop is going to have to make a decision between either improving their coffee, their prices, their service, whatever the issue may be, or going out of business. But the state school system is not subject to those market forces.
Right. And as Thomas Sowell has said for years, in fact, like the worse they do, the more money they get.
That's right. That's the irony of it, isn't it? That the funding model at a federal level has largely been geared towards the worse results, the more money, and the incentive system that then exists is, first of all, to put more money at it, but second of all, to put more money at it in the worst way possible, which is by increasing bureaucracy. This school is underperforming. They must need more superintendents.
Right.
They must need more diversity officers. They must need more worthless suits that God only knows what these people do for a living.
That's interesting.
A lot of our audience would be people that have probably long since pulled their kids out of government schools for many of the reasons that you've already alluded to. But it seems to me that there's still it's easy for Christians, conservative Christians, to pull their kids out, sigh like a relief.
Yeah. I'm
out of the system. Now I'm homeschooling. Now I'm doing a Christian school, classical conversations, whatever. And I mean, how are Christians tempted maybe to settle there, to apathy there, or laziness there?
How candid can I be with you guys?
Oh, please.
You know us.
I know with you guys because we're all homies, but with the audience, I'm just going to say something right now. Is that all right?
Please.
The apathy that the state system has around their taxpayer, monopolistic, secularized system also exists and manifests itself in different ways, very often in some of the aforementioned counter options you mentioned, whether it's homeschool, classical school, Christian school, where there is a settlement. We're not pushing for best educational product, best methodology, the best worldview orientation, the best athletic competitiveness, the best programs, the best pedigree teachers, the best student offering. We're not pushing for it because we're already so content to be better than everyone else because we have the God thing. There is a sanctimoniousness that I believe sometimes creeps in. And I'm not suggesting it's systemic. I'm not suggesting it's universal. But I think sometimes there is a belief that because we got the worldview thing right when these other folks got it wrong, then piety becomes a substitute for technique.
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't think that works long term.
Yeah. Did you learn that first in the Christian music industry?
That piety is no substitute for technique, or that there was bad product out there? No, I first learned it when I became a Christian. Yeah. You're right though. There you can see it in all sorts of different aspects of Christian subculture for sure.
Right.
There was a conversation you were having. I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts right now. What I love about your podcast is that it seems to be very balanced and nuanced, and you always make sure you hit your target. Unlike me, I just kind of shotgun blast things. But one of the things that I appreciated was you were talking about some of the problems that we currently have are not going to be the things that we solve by putting more laws in. We're going to have a resurgence of a virtue in our system that the law itself can't give us. We're going to have that build up. How are you seeing us being able to get that kind of virtue in our society? Because there are things that are different and law is going to take. I think you were talking about how people are stealing others' employees. If I remember correctly, it was something like that.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I was wondering when I talked to you, what is it that you see is going to be able to change that inside of a system? Because there's some things you just can't make laws for. So how do we get that virtue back in?
Yeah, I mean, I think what people would find is the chicken or egg is completely reversed here. You're going to have an incredibly easy time passing laws that are appropriate and they're reordering and restraining a society when the people passing the laws and the people the laws are being passed for are themselves a part of a more moral culture. So what you have is a reversal of cause and effect. You cannot use laws to get a more moral culture, but you can use a moral culture to get better laws. And people would be wise to understand the way this sequence works. You're not going to get people to stop on some of these gray area topics that you mentioned, some of the things I'm referring to, where people are trying to get around business sale agreements with poaching employees. It's become a big systemic thing in Silicon Valley. It's a classic case that people are operating within the letter of the law, but outside the spirit of the law. And so within the constructs of a market economy and a free society, I suspect these things are and will remain legal. And within the constructs of an obedient and ethical society, it's not acceptable. And you asked me what we are going to do to make that happen. Well, what I want to do is see more and more of the culture brought under the lordship of Christ through the spreading of the gospel. The gospel is truth, and the truth will set you free.
Well, there you go. Is your website user-friendly, fast, and cohesive? Does your brand clearly communicate who you are and what you have to offer? Whether you're just getting your business started or you've been around the block, Mad Bear Creative can help you with all your design needs. From brand identity and web design to SEO and marketing materials. As a husband and wife team, Julio and Roslyn are excited to partner with other small but mighty business owners to capture attention, drive engagement, and unlock growth for your business. Visit madbear.io to sign up for a free consultation and discover how Mad Bear can help you build your legacy. That's madbear.io.
David, I was doing some reading, and I've heard you always use the term free market, but you never call yourself a capitalist. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, there is. So there's actually a video about the topic. I just gave a speech up in Seattle, Washington a couple of weeks ago, begging for conservatives and Christians to quit using Marx's favorite term for us. Capitalism is a word trap that we walk into unnecessarily. And I do believe in the free flow of capital. And I have a podcast called Capital Record, because I do believe capital markets are a vital tool, a means to the end of what we want in an optimal economy and the conditions for human flourishing. But I do not believe that the ism is capital. And I think that trap we walk into is to mistake the means in the end. What we are after is a free and virtuous society. A market economy that recognizes the dignity of the individual to transact and make a better life for oneself while meeting the needs of others, producing goods and services that meet others' needs, and in so doing, make a better life for oneself and one's family. This is the heart of a market economy. This is the heart of what our founders meant by a free enterprise system. This is what classical economics is connected to in the great tradition of Adam Smith and Bastiat and Jean-Baptiste Say and David Ricardo. And it is the heart of what the 20th century free market economists from Milton Friedman to Friedrich Hayek believed in. What we are celebrating is not the ism of capital, a belief in capital. It is a belief in the human person. And what we do is we depersonalize markets by focusing on capital and using the term capitalism. So I'm not merely making a marketing claim that capitalism is often used as a pejorative, and has certainly been effective to try to separate, what sounds better, socialism, who most of us want to be social creatures, or capitalism, where it sounds like there's some sort of idolatry of money going on. Fundamentally, I believe that it is more than marketing. It is that the message itself is more fully told and more accurately told and more passionately conveyed when we focus on a free society, a virtuous society, a free enterprise system. This gets to the humanity of markets in a way that capitalism does not.
So what does capitalism do? Give me a comparison. Would the Intel chip thing be a separation between a free market person and a capitalist? Oh, you're smiling.
You tell me. That was my understanding until a few years ago. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people don't know what's so bad about it.
Here's how you answer the question. If President Barack Obama said, "I'm taking government equity in Intel," what would anyone say?
Ah!
Thank you. In fact, when he did it with about the equivalent of lunch money compared to what the government spent on Intel with a company called Solyndra, the right did do it. Now, in fairness, the difference there was Solyndra did end up going under. So not only did the government take an equity stake in a company or essentially put capital infusion into a company and the company went bankrupt, and it was done for this social, environmental, clean energy agenda. I'm not suggesting that the government's going to lose money on Intel, but I am suggesting that by principle, it is far more egregious.
And just for, I don't know, someone who might need to hear this, how bad is it?
I would have said when they first announced it, it was really bad, really unfortunate, but like so many things in this moment, an example of just sort of a lack of consistent worldview in the White House and not something that would be likely to repeat itself. But then in the 2 or 3 days that followed, the Commerce Secretary of the United States said, well, we want to go take an equity position in any company that the government's a customer. And we want to go be an equity investor in Lockheed Martin because we're their major customer. We may as well just own it. And then the National Economic Council director, Kevin Hassett, who has been a friend of mine for a long time. I've spoken with him at over 15 conferences. I've hosted him in my office over half a dozen times. But I heard Kevin Hassett go on national television and say that we wanted to start a sovereign wealth fund to have the government create a portfolio of companies that they own. So it maybe they're all just talking. But no, I think the things that they said in the aftermath of the Intel deal ought to give all of us a lot of pause. It's very concerning.
So don't shoot me for this. I'm just the messenger. But isn't that just kind of the game we're in right now? I mean, when you have the chips deal, all you're doing at that point is just allocating how much money. I mean, you already given money to Intel to be able to do these things, but $11 billion. Why not then just go ahead and invest inside of the company? What's the difference between the two?
Well, first of all, I don't believe we should have been giving Intel corporate welfare to begin with. Amen. But second of all, if you're going to then replace a grant, there was $5.7 billion of the $9.9 billion that had not been allocated. They had not given the money. The Trump administration ripped up the deal for the grant and replaced it with the equity infusion and substituted the prior smaller grant amount with equity that equaled the 10% claim, as well as another 5% of warrants where they could buy the stock for $20. And the stock is currently, as of today, trading at, let's see where, it's way in the money for the government. In other words, it's free money that other investors do not get. The stock is trading at $24.44, and the government can buy another 5% of the company at $20, about a 20% discount to market value. So to those who would say, well, the CHIPS Act is already given the money, so we may as well take equity. My question is, why are we only doing it with this company? Mm-hmm. Why did the other CHIPS Act companies get grants but not equity? Why do we believe that the best thing is for the government to now be an equity holder where if something goes wrong in the future, is the government going to have to put in more money or not? What is an example of the government having put money in a company, it goes bad, and they don't end up putting more in? There isn't a single example. So the moral hazard that we've now created from moving from the corporate welfare grant of CHIPS Act, which both the Trump and Biden administration supported, to an actual equity stake where the government, with our money that they borrowed, right? They have $37 trillion of debt. With borrowed taxpayer money, is now an equity risk taker in Intel. It's absolutely outrageous.
Tom wins the toss, chooses to receive the Bible. Patterson back with the kick. Oh my goodness!
The American church is a mile wide and an inch deep. Bigger buildings, slicker productions, We've traded shepherds for CEOs and prophets for marketing experts.
How much money did you pay for Tyler Perry's Gulfstream jet, for example?
Well, for example, that's really none of your business.
The result? Cultural surrender dressed as relevance.
Then if people get mad, they get mad at Curtis, Russell, and David.
While our cities burn with paganism, we're busy building better light shows. While Rome burns and we fiddle Led Zeppelin covers. Our fathers built hospitals and universities. They transformed nations. We can't even transform our neighborhoods. Want real change? Build strong parishes. Start classical Christian schools. Feast together. Worship together. Build communities that last. Support churches that train up generations of culture shapers. Where psalms are sung, scripture is preached, and Christ's kingdom advances. Join the Reformation.
How long do we have you for, David?
As long as you need.
Okay, so I want to, right now, the housing crisis is going on. The economic realities that are afoot. And I'm sure you hear a lot of kind of the boots on the ground conversation. And one of the things, every time we talk about getting after it, there's a lot of opportunity out there still. You talked about it earlier. A lot of people are wondering, where is the opportunity and what should they do? Right? What do I need to be able to do? Like, give me some pointers here. And I'll tell you mine. My thing has been like, as long as there's dirt and seed, like plant, create a lemonade stand, right? Like go make barbecue. Like that's something I love to do. Like do anything you can to produce any sorts amount of income and be valuable to other people. But if you had to start all over again and you're just now leaving Tooth and Records and you're in your 20s, like what do you do, especially in this current economy and where things are right now?
Well, let me suggest that one of the things people ought to do is within the mentality and this general attitude and mindset that you're describing. I'm with you that if you're backed up against the wall and you're in a corner and we're talking about survival, and then yes, I think people need dirt and seeds and go do something to grow and produce. And the worst possible outcome, worst possible situation can still produce a good outcome for the most determined, capable, faithful, godly person. However, it is tough to go into something with an attitude of my back's against the wall. I'm fighting for my very survival here. The tough will survive, but that's not the optimal condition for productive, joyful activity when you feel like you're just literally in Great Depression era, context. Let's maybe take a beat to start with gratitude that we're not in that environment or anything resembling it. Go through any problem we want right now in the current economy: excessive government indebtedness, high degree of government tax and regulation, housing affordability issues, whatever we want to focus on that is admittedly negative. But then let's go ahead and make a positive list. Would you rather be starting a business right now or when our grandparents were kids? Or in any other time in history? How's that?
I don't personally, I don't want to go back to the 50s.
There's more opportunity for people to be productive and entrepreneurial and innovative and successful. There's more robust capital markets. There's more access to experimentation, to opportunities, to technology. There's more resourcefulness. It's just a literal treasure trove of opportunity now. And so not only are the things I would do exactly what you're saying, but I would do it with the mentality of gratitude, not desperation.
David,
I can't buy a house. I can't buy a house. My grandparents could buy a house.
Hey, did you hear him? He said, be thankful.
I'm thankful that I live in today, but I can't buy a house.
So one part of this is, and you've talked about this in a number of contexts, but so much of also what makes a free market run is the willingness of people to take risks, to think. It's gratitude, but it's gratitude really married to faith that says, I believe that God made the world a certain way, and and if I'm thoughtful and intelligent and I work hard and take risks, it will pay off.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring this back to the Fight Laugh Feast conference that you're going to be speaking at, because part of what we want to do is we want to challenge parents, school administrators, families to be thinking about Christian education in terms of instilling an adventurous sense of risk, of faithful risk. What are some ways, I know you're involved in a Christian school, but what are ways that, and you've raised, your own kids, what are ways that you would challenge parents, families, Christian schools? How do we inculcate this sense of adventure and risk that then has these kind of economic fruits?
Well, there's a number of different categories that I think are relevant here. And in the book that Pastor Wilson and I co-authored, where we did about a year's worth of correspondence and they took it and put it out as a book, I talked a lot about the general mentality of seeking to create wealth, not preserve wealth. That, in other words, entrepreneurs in the parables, not just the parable of the talents, but all of Jesus' parables with an economic message, which is the vast majority of them, were focused on some sort of creative component, a growth-oriented component. Now, one of the things I'd say about your kind of summary of risk-taking wed to faithfulness is I don't think that the faithfulness means that it will always succeed. Risk-taking isn't risk-taking if you already know that the outcome will be positive.
Sure.
And so people have to find through wisdom and counsel and advice how they have the right emergency reserves, contingency plans, other elements that kind of wed responsibility to risk-taking as well.
Yes.
But some of the greatest things that have ever happened in risk-taking were failure. That then resulted in course correction, lessons learned, a second bite of the apple, an entire new experiment, what have you, that then was something more productive, successful, and fruitful the second time around. And I think your question of how we foster this pioneering spirit, this general attitude, and do so at the educational level. And I would imagine too, you have a heart for how to do it at the ecclesial level as well.
Right.
Parentally is the easiest, because I think there's nothing parents can do more productive in this regard than model it, than live it.
Yeah.
I don't believe kids become cowards in their professional endeavors if they are raised by entrepreneurs. And I don't believe it's very often that kids become entrepreneurs if they're raised by cowards. So I think modeling it is a wonderful low-hanging fruit at a parental level. But I think that the mentality in both education and the church does need to be truly reinforcing the lessons of history, both biblical history and even in our schools in the immediate past of America, that what this DNA has created is a sight to behold, where there are positive examples in commercial society for risk-taking, small business. We're so used to using Apple and Tesla and just these giant multi-trillion-dollar enterprises. But I think that there needs to be a celebration of the entrepreneur, of the small business, the family business. And as you know from my book, Full Time, I desperately want that message in the church to be decoupled from the idea that we do this so we can feed our family. That I want the kids to be animated by, you can go do ABC business because you love ABC. Because there's something, Eric Liddell's idea of I run because I feel the pleasure of God.
Yeah.
And there are people who love these various activities and industrial, endeavors that ought to be doing them because they love them and because they grow the kingdom of God by doing them. That fosters risk-taking. And so there is a whole theological framework that often is missing. And what's interesting is I don't think it is always missing intellectually. I think one thing I learned from Full Time is that there's a lot bigger challenge of people doing what needs to be done than there is them agreeing with it. I just can't tell you how many people told me they fully agree And then I asked them what they're up to, and they said they've spent about 3 years on the couch trying to figure out their next move.
Wow. What's that gap?
Well, I think that there's a character component to motivation. I think that laziness is somewhat contagious, and I've tried my best to be gracious enough to get to a different point of view on this. But when I read Proverbs, it really does seem to me that laziness and sloth is the ultimate self-reinforcing mechanism. And then you feel sorry for yourself, and then you justify more laziness because of whatever it is you feel sorry for yourself. It just creates a negative feedback loop that's incredibly destructive.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. David, I always appreciate you. I'm grateful to have you. And I'm going to do something here, put you on the spot, which is never really putting you on the spot, but could you recommend 3 good books that maybe outside of Proverbs, but that men need to read right now that would be helpful to them in this current moment, economically, virtuously? What would you recommend?
Can the last name of the author be Bahnsen on any of them?
No, that's already a given. They already have to have those.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like a lot of times there's so many things I've read that have had such a huge impact on me, and the minimal amount of writing I've done so far in my life has been that trying to convey those messages. I think of Crisis of Responsibility. There's certain parts of it that are probably dated now, but not the underlying message or ethos of the book. It's the subtitle is Our Cultural Addiction to Blame and How You Can Cure It. I think that book has dated well. I think I stand behind it, even though it's now about 8 years old. So Crisis of Responsibility is one that I really believe in. But, when you look at a theology of work, I really do believe Tim Keller's Every Good Endeavor is a wonderful book. When people are looking at just kind of various economic ideas, and if there is anyone out there that needs a sort of reinforcement as to why a market economy is a moral superior solution versus alternatives that are more collectivist or statist, I think Father Sirico's Defending the Free Market is a phenomenal book. So look, I just gave you 3 and I only wrote one of them. That's not bad.
That's pretty good. That's
because I easily could have said full time. There's no free lunch.
Yeah. No, I think everybody should have those too. That's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you, brother.
There's a pastor in Moscow who's written a few books that are pretty good on a lot of this stuff too. So
never heard of him.
Well, always appreciate you, David. You're very kind and generous with your time, and you're a good friend. And we look forward to seeing you in person in Nashville in like 6 weeks.
Yes, sir. All right, guys.
Appreciate you. In an age where lies dominate the public square, the need for virtue has never been greater. In a culture captivated by destruction and death, the world longs for builders and fighters, those anchored in truth, devoted to liberty, and committed to fruitfulness. New St. Andrews College rises to meet this need, preparing leaders who will faithfully shape culture under the lordship of Jesus Christ. New St. Andrews College offers an excellent undergraduate education in the liberal arts, firmly rooted in a Christian and Reformed perspective. Its mission is to equip students for lives of faithful service to the triune God and his kingdom, equipping them to use their gifts to cultivate and advance Christian culture. The college doesn't exist to merely hand out degrees, but to establish exceptional leaders who can wield the axe of St. Boniface to destroy idols while harnessing the wisdom of great historical thinkers to build edifices of masterful brilliance that shape the world. The call is clear. We want a generation prepared to stand firm, build wisely, and live faithfully. Applications for fall of 2025 are now open. They already started school, so I don't know. I don't know what this, I just read what they put in front of me. Anyways, you should definitely apply. You should definitely go. And you should definitely come to School Wars in Nashville.
Yes.
In 6 weeks.
David is always a breath fresh air.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate him. But go to fightlaughfeast.com and sign up if you have not yet. George Grant's going to be there. Doug Wilson's going to be there. David Bahnsen, Ben Merkel. And we really want this to be the kind of thing that's like, educating children, raising children is hard work.
Yeah.
And we know a bunch of you are doing it. And we want this to be a punch in the arm.
Yeah.
We want this, we want this to be an encouragement. We want this to be an inspiration.
Wind in the sails.
Yeah, exactly. And we want to really challenge you to think deeper, dream bigger.
Yeah.
We don't want kids that just make it.
No.
We want kids that conquer. We want kids that really are joining us in the fray. And so if that's you, if you believe in that, join us in Nashville, October 16th to the 18th. Go to fightlaughfeast.com and register today.
There's a whole lot of kind of a attitude of victim mentality that's really running around right now. And it's so funny that it's like clamping onto every part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And hearing somebody like David talk about that is just so inspiring.
This is all we can do. This is the best we can do. And it's like, hold on.
Yeah.
You're doing this in one of the most, fruitful moments
beneficial
in history.
Yeah, that's right. There's a sermon by John Piper on dealing with sin. And he's like, all I hear is murmur, murmur, murmur. Everybody wants murmur, murmur. He's like, kill sin, get to work. And that's kind of the same way. It's like, okay, you got the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Get to work.
Right. Yeah.
If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. And if you have kids, go baptize them. Until Thursday, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Crosspolitic.